Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. Well, happy August again. I want to say August is the second happiest month of the year for me. Usually June's pretty happy too. I got a number of anniversaries there. I don't have so many personal anniversaries in August, but it's a great time to kind of be fresh again, after the summer heat and all that, and after coming home from vacation, usually it's a great way to start fresh again. And this year I really, really need to start fresh. I experienced very severe burnout. I was thinking about when was the last time I felt as burnt out as I did here in 2023. And you got to go all the way back to when I was working on my PhD. And I was just comparing and contrasting my burnout today versus my burnout 13 years ago when I had a lot of stresses. What had happened was, you got to remember the environment we lived in 2010, right? People were expected to date and eventually marry, usually somebody of the opposite gender, right? This is 2010 we're talking about, right? So most of my peers, my classmates, were in a committed relationship. A few of them were married, but most people had some sort of committed relationship. And I always felt excluded for that. And I remember how I felt when I first lost my virginity. It was like I was part of the club, and I really liked it when the girl showed up to the campus. I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't even like the girl all that much. And now looking back at it, it felt like it now feels like a form of predatory inclusion. Eventually I met a girl who took advantage of me financially, spiritually, and I nearly dropped out of school. And now looking back at it, I had a number of close friends who tried to sabotage the relationship. I didn't know it at the time, but they were trying to do me a good. And it's kind of funny. My PhD advisor was obviously very upset about it, but she understood it. She was, to give you an idea, she gets more upset when I make other stupid decisions, right? So when I was working on my PhD, there are other stupid things I did besides getting taken advantage by a girl, right? Hanging with the wrong crowds, abusing caffeine, right? I still grapple with caffeine issues, but I used to grapple with it a heck of a lot more. I used to eat, this comes from a 4-ounce chocolate bar. I used to eat 3 or 4 of those every day. Of course, Let's Go Brandon has made that impractical these days. I remember when I was eating it, they used to go for $1.50, $1.69 maybe, for a 4-ounce bar. Good old days, right? But my advisor was more upset about this than about the getting taken advantage by a girl. I think she understood why I got involved with the girl. But eventually, after I left her, I experienced the most severe burnout situation because I had fallen behind at school. I was broke. Couldn't afford even my caffeine anymore. I lost my car. I didn't lose it, but I didn't have money to fix up the car. I can't even remember what the car trouble was anymore. I was riding my bicycle everywhere, and I also got very deathly ill from the time I was with the girl because I was not eating properly. I was eating fish out of Lake Ontario and some roadkill, and now looking back at it, I wonder if I caught some kind of a virus, right? Or it could have been heavy metal toxicity. I learned that fish from Lake Ontario can be pretty high in mercury, and actually, my body's very sensitive to heavy metals. Earlier this year, I was working with antimony, and I felt very, very similar. It brought back memories of when I was toxic with mercury. The antimony had a very similar effect. Fortunately, antimony doesn't accumulate in the body very readily, right? It has a half-life in the body that's only a few days, and I probably shortened it even more by taking alpha-lipoic acid. So it wasn't the end of the world, but it brought back tears of joy in terms of the memory. So it was nice. I'm probably not going to work with antimony again anytime soon after my experience. But eventually I did catch up on my work on my PhD program, and that was good. So that brings us to 13 years later. I had a lot of stresses going into 2023. And to understand why, what had happened was I started the year working for a very toxic manager at a tutoring center. Now, I love tutoring. I now look for clients on my own on Facebook Marketplace, and I love how I get to do it on my own terms and ways. So, for example, I had a very toxic client this week, and I was able to kill him with kindness to the point that he almost doesn't know how to respond to me, and that's good because I kind of wanted to get rid of him. I was hoping he would ghost me, and I got it because I completely killed him with kindness. Other clients in the past, I've gotten them to reply to me very combatively because I combatively got angry at them, right? But this one, I just said, why don't we come back when you're more ready for this? I know you're struggling with a few other things, and you know what? I kind of lied to him. He came to my class completely unprepared yesterday, very upsetting, waste of my time, and so I told him, I actually stayed behind. I could have left for vacation last week because Phoenix College is on break right now, but I stayed behind because I knew you had some medical problems. And then you come here high and unprepared. I know you're still grappling with things. Why don't we come back to our classes when you're more ready? And more importantly, I think I'll be more ready if I can take a 1-week trip. Right? It could have been 2 weeks, but now I still have 1 week left on my break. Why don't we come back after that? I actually don't want him to come back, but I wanted to kill him with kindness so that he would stop talking to me, and also just in case that he was the right client, and he could bring about word of mouth. So I was kind of hedging my bets, if you will. I wanted to get rid of him, but I still wanted, if I was making a mistake and he was going to bring in new clients, I still wanted that part of the equation. So that is good. Now contrast that to when I was working at the tutoring center. So I had a student who was studying microeconomics, and I had the same lesson a couple days ago, but this time on my own terms. So I got to compare and contrast, and it made me very upset at my manager. I was giving the student an example. My student was studying about substitutes versus complements, right? So for example, left shoes and right shoes. Your utility from having 1,000,000 left shoes would be 0 without any right shoes to pair it with, right? Or substitutes would be like, maybe instead of eating baking chocolate, I could drink coffee instead. Or those two would probably be more like substitutes, right? And so we walked through a few examples. This was back at the tutoring center last year. We were walking through examples, and I brought up some personal examples, and my boss always gets edgy about real life examples that I give. He thinks some of mine are too adult-like material, and so I was giving an example. This kid is 16 years old, and I felt it was appropriate, but I'll let you guys decide if it was appropriate. I told him about how when I was 23 years old, I went on my first date with myself, and I had a really good time. And I asked him what he thought the relationship between going on dates with yourself versus going on a date with a partner was. Was that more of a substitute or a compliment? And I let him think about that. And my boss got very edgy when I said that. He was worried that I was going to bring something up, and we worked through the example, and my student instinctively said they were a substitute, and I told him I don't 100% agree with you. I told him that there are times when I have a relationship with a girl, but I still like my personal space, right? So I need both kinds of dates. And then there are times when I just broke up with a girl and I go out a lot by myself, or I just had turbulence with myself, and I feel like I'm left out, and I go on a dating spree, right? So at the extremes, they can substitute each other, but in normal times, they are kind of complements, right? So I showed him that there are things that are in between substitutes and complements. This is my favorite example for this, by the way. But my boss got very edgy he got very concerned in his face. But when I wrapped it all up, he was relieved that there's nothing to it, right? This is a 16-year-old boy who probably has experienced this, right? This is nothing new, right? But things like that. The fact that my boss gets edgy creates a little bit of a rift with how I do my work, right? It pigeonholes my creativity, stifles stuff. And so I began the year with a toxic relationship with my manager, and I decided that I needed a second source of income in order to not be so concerned about my job. And so I started making metal art, right? First out of bismuth and then out of other metals. Lately I've been diversifying to other forms of art. And unfortunately, I learned the hard way that doesn't come for free, right? It steals all the energy that I was hoping to use when negotiating at the tutoring center, and eventually I had to quiet quit that job. And then I started teaching at Phoenix College. And I haven't run into that kind of issue with my manager at Phoenix College, but I have other problems there. I have one colleague who, he and I are just on very silent, hostile terms, right? I can't find the right keys to open him up. He sits there quietly, holed up, and it makes me very anxious. He doesn't respond when you talk to him about the weather, about sports, about anything. And it just makes me a little. I gotta find the right keys to his heart, I don't know if that's the right term, or maybe find the right code to defuse his bomb. Right? I don't know. I'll let you guys leave a comment about that. And the other issue is that I have very little time for myself sometimes. Aside from the art projects, I'm working on a publication, right? Because Phoenix College, they're opening a computer science department, and I definitely want first dibs in any teaching opportunities there. And then I would get done with this. I have no time to cook for myself. I'm very sleep deprived half the time. This past week I got into 3 close calls in terms of car accidents on the road, and it's very reminiscent to what happened in 2010. See, 2010, I got myself burnt out as a result of turbulence with a girl. This time it's more like turbulence with myself, right? Finding the right job, finding the right way to entertain myself, and so it's kind of reminiscent of 2010, but instead of with a girl, it's with myself, right? And this time, there are a couple girls that I'm thinking about at Phoenix College. I'm thinking about. There's this distant cousin of Mary Curry who's a staff member at the library, and she's kind of fascinated with my publication. But unfortunately, I discovered she's more of an Evelina Falenta than a Mary Curry. She's content with her single life. And so am I. I'm more looking for a life partner, and I hope to reveal that to her in a meaningful way, right, over the next month or so. I know she's not looking for romance, but what she doesn't know is neither am I, and we might fit together. And then there's another professor there who's a distant cousin of Putin, and I like to think of her as Putin's ex, because she disagrees with Putin and thinks the whole thing is a disaster. Hopefully, once I find that life partner and who can balance this out. Right now, a lot of times when I was dealing with the publication, the art projects, I have no time to take care of my home life, right? That's the kind of partner I'm looking for, right? Unfortunately, how you reveal that is kind of, especially in a work setting, right? It's kind of tricky, right? Anyways, so I experienced my biggest burnout in 13 years, and it brought back a lot of tears of joy of how far I've come. And I wouldn't say they were painful memories. This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum 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 bum.